So hi everybody, thanks for coming to the workshop, and again apologies that I can't be there, but I think it might be fun to, I've never done this workshop virtually, but I've done this workshop quite a bit with people around the world, similar kinds of workshops, and they tend to be very helpful in trying to take some lofty ideas about what we mean about human values and games for good and actually make them kind of concrete in a really quick session. So I'm really glad you're all here. Thanks for sitting on the floor, hanging out. We're going to do about half an hour of kind of brainstorming and working in groups, about 5 people. So we'll do that in a little bit. And then we're going to get up and do a physical game that everyone will get to play and then modify. But I want to just lay the groundwork a little bit for us here today. One thing that we can do in thinking about values, some of the easiest ways to think about it is to take an existing game and to transform that game. So for example, I don't know if anyone's ever played the Atari game Combat, where you have 2 tanks trying to annihilate each other. So with a little tweaking, could Combat suddenly become a game about creative expression? These are ideas for you to brainstorm and think about. Here we have Bejeweled. Probably many of you are familiar with a game like this, a matching game. What if we took this kind of game engine and made it a game about empathy, where you're laying off workers during financial crises and austerity measures? This was a game we made in 2008 at Tilt Factor, and we did find that it encouraged empathy among players, as players had to do draconian things to people who had actual biographies in the game. So there are lots of ways to do this. Here's, I think my little video window's in the way, but this is me with my 10-foot-tall working Atari joystick sculpture called Giant Joystick. It's actually in Germany right now. And I made it to embody the value of cooperation. The joystick is so large that you can't actually play it by yourself. You need help. You need a friend to jump on the work. And actually, this was a commission originally from Furtherfield, a London-based arts organization in 2006. And so this is something that, we think about games as existing games as like kind of these things that can't be changed. And of course, I like to, play with that idea. So when we think about values, it's really important to figure out, well, what do we mean by values? Here's a list of some of them. And in this talk, I have a few different lists for us to just think about. But values are often the ideas that, these human principles, can we embed these human principles into our games that we would like to make? And by values, we mean commonly encountered values that are socially recognized by a given society. These can be culled from the UN charters, other various legal documents of particular societies around the world. And often they're quite common. If you go around the world and look at statements of rights, for example, human rights, they are more shared than not. And of course, values are on the mind. Probably some of you saw this tube map. We're at a point where we develop a lot of kinds of technologies, but we really want them to make sure they're meeting our human needs first. And games are a great way in which we can think about that. So while we're not designing a technology today, we will be talking about different technologies. And of course, technologies will be natural extensions of the design ideas that we put into place. Here's another list of, I don't know if you can see that because you also might see me here, of just different values. There are many, many kinds of values. And it's great to figure out, well, what do we actually mean by these different values? What do we mean by the value of cooperation or creativity? And so to do that, to have that conversation, my team and I, actually Helen Niesenbaum, who's a philosopher, and I created this kit called the Grow a Game. And it's a card game, and it's also a free app that you can use to brainstorm thinking about values and games for social impact, games for change as a place to be able to have that conversation. So these are helpful tools. We'll be using them today. Scott has a whole bunch of them, and so we will be employing them in our discussion. So in the Grow a Game deck, there are 4 categories of items. So there are verbs. Many people think about games when they first are thinking about them. It's like, okay, well, games are about this. I want to make a game about deforestation, right? But games are also actions. We do things in games. That's what separates them from other media. One of the many things that separate them from other media. So verbs or actions in games actually matter. What a player does in a game. We have challenges such as social issues or conflicts. And then we have existing games that you could try to modify as a starter idea, and values. So there's just lists and lists and lists of values in the various Grow a Game things, as well as blank cards for different communities to add their own values. So I want to start getting groups of 5, and let's get some blue values cards to each of the groups, a values card to each group. And what I'd like everybody to do is just think of an existing game or a game mechanic or a game action that might embody the value that you're going to be given. So this is like totally workshop. There's no right answer, but I'd like you to think about any kind of game. It could be a sport. It could be digital games. It could be board games. You know, they're very old things. We have had board games around since before written language, so they have a lot to teach us. And if everyone has this card, I'd like you to take 5 minutes and kind of hash out where you would have that example of that value in a game. So Scott, are you ready?
Yeah, let's get into, is it groups of 5, right?
Ish. I mean, I can't quite tell how many people are in the room, but...
So what were we talking about, guys? We were a little bit stuck. I mean, it was like, oh dear. And we had environmentalism. Can you hear me, Mary? Okay, so we had environmentalism, and we kind of got onto the tracks of looking at things that we had to preserve or build, and there was a risk that it would collapse or something. There was some feedback to suggest that it wasn't stable. So we were thinking about games like Kaplunk and Jenga. And what else were we? What was the game that you mentioned before?
It's not that good, but like theme park world. So it's sort of thinking about building and like the cause and effect of that. But like in that game, it's more of the effect on how much money you're making. But you could kind of make a game so that what you build kind of directly affects the environment.
Great, that's great. Did the groups notice that you had to kind of define your value? I mean, what do we mean by environmentalism? You know, like environmentalism. It sounds like it translated that to sustainable systems and balance, right? Like Jenga is about this kind of sense of balance. So that's interesting that you went there. Let's hear from the other groups.
Sure. Okay. Should we go there? Okay, guys.
We had cooperation, which I think may have been one of the easier ones to do in terms of the fact that, when we sort of listed a whole bunch of genres of games and things like that, MMOs and that sort of thing. But we're also talking about team sports, talking about even things like, skipping and stuff like that, kids games. I mean, cooperation is this kind of value even the sense of playing together at all is basically going to be about cooperation or competitiveness. So that's where we ended up. So there's just so much that we could say.
Did you guys think of a game that doesn't have competition in its cooperativeness?
No. Yeah, not.
Well, some people might say that that's not a game, that a game has to have competition, but that definition, of course, is up for us to challenge.
Like I can think of one that's Animal Crossing, where you play in a group, and the aim of the game is so the villagers wouldn't leave, and you try to persuade them not to, and everyone in your group must persuade the person not to leave the village, and you don't get a new person moving in. But then people do comment whether Animal Crossing is a game or not, because it's quite...
Well, we can say it is. Yeah. It's sold in the game aisle. So yeah, great example.
We started off, as you suggested, trying to define, because none of us, we didn't have a common agreement on what mindfulness was. So we kind of Googled it quickly and cheated and took the Buddhist perspective of mindfulness, which we were reasonably comfortable with. So we came up with a number of games, digital games particularly, where mindfulness was perhaps at the core or a core value. Most of the God Sims, Spore, Black and White. You came up with an example. Eco. And then we said, well, actually, what about non-digital games? And we really, really struggled. And I think that's where we were.
We debated a lot of non-digital games, and decided that they weren't
Yeah.
mindfulness.
No, chess was one example that we have discussed it, and then we talked about the confrontation in chess, and that seemed at odds with the definition that we were working with, which was mindfulness, which was our starting point.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Strangely enough, this and this is not the reason I'm here, but there is this anecdote that I have in my research about, we created a game called Pox, which was a board game, and we made a digital version, and then we made a zombie board game version of that game. And it teaches systems thinking, and it teaches about vaccination and these kinds of things, because in the United States, you know, we have a little bit of a problem with renegade, anti-public health people. And it was really interesting because the digital game actually was played 10 to 20% faster. People spoke 10 to 20% less to each other. And one could say it was less mindful. The players got less out of that game. Their scores were consistently lower than the board game. And we are coming up with ways to make digital games more mindful in some way. It's depending on how you want to think of, define mindful. So it's interesting that the board games actually do allow for space and thinking about things that the digital game in our particular study did not. So anyway, that's interesting research. It's a loaded area for and a rich topic, but I don't want to take up more time. So I'll just move on to the next group. Thank you for mindfulness. That was great. What did the other group have?
Okay, we've got privacy.
That's a nightmare. Yeah.
Well, I think like with the groups, we had trouble understanding what privacy was or what it meant. One of the first things that I think we sort of all jumped to was like concealed information. So in any kind of card game such as poker, where there's value in keeping like some bit of information secret to yourself to be revealed later on for victory. But then we sort of moved away from that and then thought about, an example was solitaire came up and actually linked again to mindfulness, a sort of privacy as being kind of on your own or doing something for your own personal benefit and no one else's. Not necessarily in secret, but the solitude as being kind of an important part of the value. So games like solitaire, like puzzles, so things like Sudoku and crosswords, where you're just with yourself for the benefit of your own company, if you like. But then thinking about like digital games, we had the opposite problem. Thinking about digital games where you were private in that same way. Because I think examples like a Farmville type game on mobile, where you make something for yourself and you're constructing your farm and you're having that personal experience, but you're always being watched by the company who's collecting the metrics and data about you. Sort of hiding behind one way, mirror was the metaphor. So watching you play, but giving you the illusion of privacy.
Well, that's a great group discussion and very timely. I mean, I hope that many of you felt that many of these values were really very pressing and interesting issues for us, right? Like how do we, violence in video games, there's always a debate about this, no matter what the era. Maybe cooperation kind of helps us think about that in a new light, and also this idea of privacy. So many of our technologies are pervasive and violating privacy, whether people agree to it or not. So what does that really mean for us as people interested in the design space, as people interested in making new kinds of games? This is a really interesting conversation. Do we have one more group, or are we done? We have four groups, right?
We're done now, Mary.
Okay, great. Okay, so thanks everybody. So we're going to move on a little bit and do a few other things. So courtesy. There are many values. Among the values that we have in all of the decks, there's about 60 or some odd values, as well as this idea of the blanks that we could fill in particular groups' values. But one of the prompts that gets me thinking about this space that's really important for us is that games and other media are created by those who live in culture and who are surrounded by their own cultural imaginary. Games being a cultural medium, they are older than human written language, so they really are a part of being human, and they carry embedded beliefs within their representation systems, whether designers intend them or not. So the way that we're trying to think about values is maybe we can intentionally embed a value into a game rather than seeing what happens and hope that our game has values that we respond to. Because again, values can emerge in many kinds of ways. So a next really quick modding exercise is just add an existing game to this value and see if you can modify it. Scott will run around and give you pink cards, and this is it's called quick mod, just really fast because I do want to get us moving to the physical part of the workshop, but the conversations are very important. So I take your existing value and add a pink card per group and do a 3-minute brainstorm on a way to modify the game you're given with the value. If everybody's ready, we can let's share these quick mods, and let's hear from a different person in the group.
Okay. Well, we came up with Pac-Man being the consumer, who didn't have mindfulness, but they were like going around gobbling up all the natural resources, and we said that the ghosts were maybe activists, right? So then there gets a point in the game when the consumer or Pac-Man eats one of the red pills and powers up. And then, what did we say after that?
Then we got stuck.
Then we got stuck, that's what I'm suggesting. We got stuck with saying that maybe the consumer got to see it from the activist point of view. How would that work? We're not sure. And yeah, that's kind of where we got up to.
Yeah, rich fodder there. Yeah. All right. Good. Let's hear. Let's hear from the next group and see how far everybody got us. It's a tough challenge, right?
Okay. So the next group we got cooperation and football.
So we were initially confused about football actually. Couldn't quite determine what kind of football it was, but it sounds like maybe it's rugby or gridiron or maybe Australian women's football, something along those lines. So that kind of football, not the soccer kind of football. And I mean, obviously there's already quite a cooperative element there anyway, so we thought the first thing we thought was how could we improve cooperation, and sort of came to the conclusion that we would insert a sort of compulsory pass system where you had to pass to your team members, so no individual could fail to cooperate effectively to get a goal. But there was another one as well that you guys mentioned.
So the enemy, someone from the other team helps you score. You know, so kind of like, it's not that he's a traitor, but he doesn't want to tackle you and instead wants to help you on.
Right, but if it's institutionalized that you have to help the other team win at a certain point of the game, for example, then it becomes a cooperative part, right? And then it wouldn't be quite so like a betrayal. Interesting.
Any other comments?
All right.
Okay, next group.
Let's hear from the next group.
That's the mindfulness group, and they've got operation.
Yeah, we thought that was really great, really, because we didn't think you could have operation without mindfulness, because we were taking our definition of mindfulness to be about awareness of consequences and what you're doing. And because I'm a nurse and we're big on teaching compassion in nurses in the UK at the moment, this seemed ideal to have a nice little backstory for the patient that you're operating on, so that you've got more awareness and mindfulness of what's happening to that person when you rip out their funny bone.
I suggested a system of inflicting pain on somebody when you were operating work, but that didn't go down.
No, we shouted him down on that one.
Right, yeah. The Milgram experiments come to mind.
Exactly. Well, that's what we were talking
And what
about.
happened to Milgram?
Okay.
Maybe you could operate that. Anyway, go on.
The last group, we're back to privacy and battleship.
Well, we thought this was a no-brainer when we first got it, because we thought, well, Battleship is all about privacy and protecting the details of where your ships are. But then that sort of threw us back to thinking, but is it really private? You know, what do we mean by privacy? And that led us to think whether there was a weird version of Battleship where you could actually start where everybody knew everything, and the object of the game, or through the course of the game, people gradually took things into their own realm and started to conceal them or started to sort of make them private. Don't know how that would work, but I don't. We're sort of still thinking about privacy.
Really, that's really great. That there's a sense of matching, like not assuming that the game is automatically, on the surface. Oh, sure, it's a game about privacy. I have hidden information, but is that really how we would like to, as a culture, define privacy and one's autonomy in that privacy, right? That one can choose what is private. So those are really great. Those are really great examples. All right, everyone, these are great. I have a feeling people in the UK can do this better than people in the US. I don't exactly know why. But yeah, I think maybe, I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but that's really, you're advanced. It's good. All right, so just
we're in the university, Mary.
That's right. That's right. That's what it is. So I just want to have a few slides about how games work. This is a total shorthand. Many of you are already knowing this. You pick it up, but I wanted to just make literal some of the kinds of assumptions we make even about games, just in a really quick set of slides before we move on to our next exercise. In 1981, Chris Crawford wrote what is the first book on computer games, computer game design book, and he made this great graphic, which is very timely at the time, Pac-Man, comparing, looking at the difference between a story and a game. And this is a very simplified version, but it does show you one of the fundamental differences is this idea of player choice, that players have a sense of choice, even if it's sometimes an illusion of choice. It's still this idea of agency and choice. And games have different kinds of components than do other media forms, such as objectives. What are the goals for the player? What are the rules? What are the procedures a player can do and follow? Where does the game begin and end? What are the boundaries? This is particularly interesting in ARGs when you might want to involve someone on the street. Are they part of the game or not really? Are they? What are the resources of a game? Maybe your ships are a resource, but you can also think about other elements in the game as a resource. The players themselves might be framed to be able to do some different kind of work or some different kind of interpretation of things. Whoa! That was a digital craziness here. Hold on. And then conflict. Typically games have conflict, but there's not always it's not always a competition conflict against another player. Sometimes it's a game against a system. If you've ever played Pandemic, for example, or my game Pox, players are working against a larger superstructure to stop it, such as a disease spreading or something like that. So the conflict can be against chance. It can be against another player. It can be player-to-player conflict. It can be player against system conflict. So there are lots of ways that conflict can be manipulated in a game. This is a real shorthand. Obviously, there are lots of ways we could take this discussion, but I really want us to get into a physical modding of a game. So I don't know how many of you have played Ninja. But this is, but before we start, I want the groups to switch values, because I think you could leave as an expert in mindfulness in games today, but I also think it's good to try another value. So I'd like each of the groups to pass their value to the left. And then we're going to get up and move around, and we're going to play Ninja. Ninja's a pretty easy game. Have the values been passed? There we go. Thank you.
Where's the one that you got?
Who has heard of Ninja? Who has heard of Ninja?
How many hands? So we've got two.
All right.
Two.
This is way easier to teach if you're in the room. But I have some videos of how this game is played. Basically, it's a game where it's almost like Statue Maker, but with moves. So players get in a group, and they get one move of the arm, and they are allowed to move 1 foot each move as they go around. And the objective of the game is to touch another player's hand. If you touch another player's hand, they can become out. Oh yes, we have actual rules that you can follow along with. But I'd like you to check out this video, because I think if you see it in action, it will give you a little sense. This is just people playing Ninja on the playground. So you see that people can, if you notice while this is being played, people can move, and the person who's the target can respond. They can only their arms, and they're not supposed to be moving their whole body. Okay. Now this game goes on. You see that in this sequence, the people on the left, the guy in the checked shirt, makes a move here. They're not hitting each other. They're not. He makes a move. He doesn't see it coming. The player behind him hits his hand, and the other player hits her hand. So now there's two people out. And by the way, when I say hit, I mean tap. It's loving. No violence, please. Here's the game as it shrinks down. If your hand is tapped, you're out, and the crowd shrinks and shrinks as you play. Okay. So here are 4 people left. That was a little violent. She decides to not make a move towards others. So they got her arm on the other side, okay? And then this is the game as it's down to 2 people. This is like the final throws. You shouldn't have moved both feet. Okay, so I'd like everyone to play this game in groups of, you may even be able to do 2 big groups actually.
Are you kissing back?
I'm thinking about it. Thanks for ruining my strategy. Okay.
What's happened there?
I'm out.
That was very quick.
Yeah. My turn.
Yeah, your turn.
You're relieved, really.
2 for 1, well done.
So, is that your position?
Yeah.
Very nice, huh?
If you fall over your head. You've won.
Okay, so now we've figured this out. You, after you were tagged early, perhaps you're like, there are some tricks that people use that I could pick up for my next round of Ninja. So it takes a little bit of play before you feel like you can master this tagging game. Okay. Now I'd like us to go back to our groups, smaller groups. Pick up the values card and mod this game with the value that is in your group. There's a lot of silence and pensive sound coming.
So maybe you start then.
And then it's your turn.
So you
Leave your arm on the top.
and then we have
Mark's turn.
let's just try 1, 2, 3.
Rosie's turn.
I thought we were doing 3.
So I hope everybody's having that moment where it's like, well, it's easy to toss out it's easier to toss out a clever idea, but when you actually put it in the game and try it, it may not be a better game. So we're always trying to make something better than the original. So it's hard, right? It's really hard. Anyway, keep going. And if you need to play test with another group, you could swap rules and have the other group try out your rules. Group that is standing around over there, come over here and talk to me. All right, so I hate to interrupt the fun, but I do want to have a few minutes for sharing all the different design ideas, and then trying to reflect upon what challenges you faced as designers and as players really incorporating values in a deep way into even such a simple game. What are the challenges you face? So first, let's for those of you who didn't get to play each other's games, let's give a 30-second description of your modification.
Somebody, all right, our game, the way we modified it was our value was privacy, so we closed our eyes.
And how did that work for the players?
Oh, good fun.
Let's hear from players.
Especially if you're a sad old man like me. It's the most excitement I've had in 20 years, is that? God. We are being deep, aren't we?
Yes. Okay. So next group.
Okay. Well, our value was mindfulness, and so we decided that when you were hit, you would freeze into the pose of the person who hit you, and that the result would be an emerging sculpture, human sculpture, of whatever the a mindful sculpture.
Like winning poses.
Yes, winning poses.
Wow.
Right, so eventually everyone would become the winning pose.
Yes.
Ah, interesting.
Opposed
Okay.
So.
And then that seems to be tied into the other group here. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, cooperation.
Which was difficult because it's kind of like the aim is to eliminate everyone apart from yourself. So we spent a long time trying to work out how it could work in teams, or work where someone was it and they had to try and get everyone, but then everybody else had to work as a team to all stay in the game. And then I don't think like the circle was working for that. So then we thought maybe we wouldn't have a circle and it could just be everyone sort of free roams, but it would work better with more people. So, and then I said, like the game's stuck in the mud, so someone's on, or someone's it, and they have to tag people, but then other people can rescue each other by going under their arms. Are you familiar with that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it could be like that, but ninja. But then it'd only work if like you all sort of move to a timer. So it'd be like there's a timer,
Like
so
to
everyone
music.
would move at the same time. Yeah, I don't know.
It could be a music game.
Yeah, we don't have.
Right.
Okay, great. Next group.
Okay.
And we had environmentalism. And so we
Sorry.
basically, so we weren't really sure whether to go sort of down a basic route or to try and make it conceptual, and so I think we sort of ended up kind of failing at either of those things, and we came up with this idea that didn't really work, which was that we would have squirrels. So it would be trees, we would have squirrels, there would be a protester, and then it would all kind of stand in for the maybe like the fundamental complexities of trying to save like certain select areas. So the trees would be like trying to get the squirrels from each other, but also competing, and the protester would be able to make a tree safe temporarily if they were touching them. They couldn't be attacked, but it wasn't playable really, and I don't know. That was we got some pictures of some squirrels, which was quite entertaining. But other than that, yeah, it just didn't. Altering it too much made it non-functional, I think.
Right. Well, I think what I'm hearing is sometimes a very simple modification to the existing game rules change the game utterly, right? And then sometimes a very simple modification was not far enough to change and embody the value. I think in the environmentalism case, it's really difficult because it sounds like a topic, like, protesters and things. But anytime you're working in games for impact, try to go to the verb. Like, what does it mean to act environmentally sensitive or act out environmentalism? And then if you start looking at what the actions are, sometimes that helps you get to the heart of the game a little bit more than putting on a topic and thinking about the existing power relations. So it's just, these are challenges that we all face in making any kind of game for impact. And I think you'll see throughout the Playing for Change conference that that to get to really deep and meaningful change is really tough, and game design is, it seems really simple. These are all children's games, la la la, but making a good game that people really want to play in their spare time and isn't just something that someone thought of and it's not very good. Like making something people really want to play takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of iteration. So I'm really glad that you all thought about this and were able to come and play and break down you went into the magic circle today in this workshop and really wanted to take risks, and I think that's really awesome. There's a great, Marsha McLuhan talked about, we shape our tools and therefore our tools shape us. So if we're going to make new kinds of social order, we have to make new kinds of tools, and games can be part of that social structuring. And to leave you today, I want us to just be reflecting on these processes that we went through about how, when we tried out the game, you thought of an idea, and then you went so far as to try it out. You actually came out of this with an iterative process. So in traditional software design or any kind of iterative design, you set your design goal and you develop your rules and you play test and then you keep going, right? Game design is all about failure and how things can be improved and improved each time you tweak it and tweak it. But what we did today was a little bit extra, right? What we did is even harder, which is we set values goals with the design goals. We developed rules and constraints to support the values. We designed for many play styles. Maybe someone didn't feel comfortable closing their eyes. Well, then what do we do with that player? Can they play this game or not? And then you developed a playable prototype and saw its flaws right away. And that's the difference between the brainstorm activity and then the prototyping activity. Brainstorming, we can go, oh yeah, this is a great idea. That sounds great. Playing it, that's when the rubber hits the road, right? Like we know, oh gosh, this doesn't work so well as a game. Why? Why is that? And how can we change it? And keeping values constantly in that process is part of the way that we can make sure our games embody different kinds of values. Now, if you're interested in this work, there are more exercises that you can do. We're not going to do them today. I didn't plan on it, but I wanted you to know that there's tons of different exercises, as well as there's a lot of literature on this kind of work, especially using Grow a Game tools. So there's a book coming out this year called Values at Play in Digital Games, and then there's lots of articles and stuff, most of them on our website, tiltfactor.org, that have people like studies using these tools and ways we can get examples and thinking about like design heuristic for activist and or social impact games. So I wanted to share that with you, and I wanted to just say thank you all for coming to this workshop. Even though I'm virtual, I had a good time. I wanted to play Ninja too, and I hope that you can take this with you and reflect upon where the challenges were for you and your group. Was it the value? Was it the action? Was it keeping things fun? And as you practice this, you can move away from modding existing games to creating completely original games of your own. So thank you all for coming to the virtual workshop here. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mary, for joining us from wherever you are, so far away. Really enjoyed the workshop. Many thanks again.
Thank you. It's probably the most fun you'll have in a workshop, but it also means that you have to think critically about it, right? Like we had fun, but we also did some work, which is the best kind of work.
Definitely.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Goodbye, Mary.